Let's bring in counselor to the president now, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, thank you for joining me today. This is big news because the nation potentially will see a State of the Union unless Speaker of the House Pelosi steps in and disinvites the president. What's your take at this point from the White House?
The president intends to go to the chamber on Tuesday night to address our great nation and give them an update on the state of our union. It would be, I think, remarkably petty of the speaker to disinvite the president of the United States to address the nation that they both serve at the highest level. And I just want to correct politely one thing John Roberts said. The president is not being vicious toward Speaker Pelosi. I was there in the Oval when he was writing this letter, when he was sending it out, as were others, and he was not being vicious at all. He said, I want people to be able to make their plans. I intend to do this on Tuesday. There's been some opaqueness from the speaker. There's been some uncertainty surrounding whether or not the State of the Union would take place on Tuesday as scheduled or in Congress in the Capitol as is tradition. And so the president wanted to put that to rest so people can plan. The First Lady is inviting guests to the State of the Union, as is the custom for every First Lady. And if Speaker Pelosi wants to disinvite those people as well, or not give us enough seats to be able to invite all of these guests who represent the best of America and the best of America's spirit, then she's going to have some explaining to do. Look, I think fundamentally she's someone who doesn't always have control of her temper about the president, but she often doesn't have control of her own chamber. I think she's afraid that many people are not going to show up, and that's embarrassing to her. She basically needs to say to her caucus, I want you to attend the State of the Union. I want you to be able to go back to your constituents at home and say, when I had a chance to listen to the president talk about what happened in the last year, what the vision is for the year ahead, you were seated there, you were polite in the chamber. You don't need to clap, you don't need to stand, you don't need to agree, you don't need to give an affirmative vote, but you should show up. This is a party, the Democratic Party, is so focused on 2020 that they're not focused, as my boss is, the President of the United States, on 2019.
All right. I do want to step in with something that does have the nation's focus, and that is a growing backlash against a government shutdown now. 71% of people in some polling showing that the border wall fight is not worth shutting down the government. That is a backdrop now to what is going on with the State of the Union. So I'm curious to know, what exactly does the president want to say the State of the Union is if the government is still shut down next week?
Well, the president has said again and again, including in his proposal that he released publicly on Saturday, Harris, that he is coming across to the Democrats in some of their wish lists. They have asked for more immigration judges, more personnel at the border. They want technology, including drones. They certainly want more detention beds and money for humanitarian needs at the border. And I think we can all agree, since every single Democrat in the House and Senate who voted for the historic drug legislation last year, they've already said drugs are a problem through that vote. They've already put the funding and the awareness and the teeth behind combating our drug crisis in this country. So when it comes to doing so at the southern border, the way they're doing in their own communities, why the big fat no? It makes no sense. So the president has come to the Democratic wish list and said, here are the things that I can agree with.
And he'll make that part of the State of the Union next week, that wish list? Okay, I want to move on because we got to get to this. America now watching to see how many more days beyond where we are into a second month now with a partial government shutdown. 800,000 people hurting. The president signing legislation that they'll get back pay. But many of those contractors in the constellation around those government workers will not get that pay. That is traditionally how it works, and they are going without. So this is a broadened swath of people who are damaged as the government is shut down. If the president is given something that both houses of Congress agree on, will he sign it?
It depends what it says. He obviously has said that he wants people to be paid. And that they will be paid.
We got that, but will he sign something that doesn't have border wall funding as we get late in the game now? But a
Harris,
date.
But that's not realistic. I'm sorry.
But a date certain to talk about it. That's
it's not border wall funding. It's border security. Look, if you don't have a physical barrier that people cannot crawl under, climb over, drive through, or walk around, then we don't really have border security. That's just false. What happened to all these Democrats who have made joyful noises and affirmative votes in favor of secure fences and barriers and indeed walls that already exist in the past. They're being disingenuous. They voted for the funding to put it there. They voted for the funding to renovate it more recently. They're just being petty and partisan, and we want them to come over. We need a bipartisan solution to what should be a nonpartisan problem. We have great compassion for the workers. We have great compassion for the contractors. And as the president said, it could take 45 minutes, 15 minutes, or shorter if the Democrats would just come to the table, allow for the entire border security package, which includes so many things they pretended they wanted over the years, and get moving and reopen the government. They need to do this. And the worst thing that could happen is to not have the State of the Union in Congress with everyone there on Tuesday, so that the country can see everybody together working towards these solutions.
All right. I wrote it down, joyful noises, and that's what we can sometimes call when people have voted for something in the past. I've asked Democrats, would you tear down the 600 plus miles that you have now? And they would say no. So we know from the majority leader in the House, Steny Hoyer, and others, barriers, walls in some areas do work. Kellyanne Conway, thank you very much. The president insisting on having a State of the Union address. Will continue to cover the breaking news. Thank you.
The hat that dare not show its brim. That's the focus of tonight's angle. There's so much news to cover every day in Trump world that you'd think the press would stick to real reporting and analysis on important political developments. But no. So move over Anna Wintour, because left-wing malefactors are now in the business of dissing fashion accessories. Oh, no, not that one. No, not ugly flip-flops. No. Yes, that one, bingo!
MAGA hat carries a certain connotation that provokes a conditioned reaction from many people, especially for marginalized people.
America is already the most punitive developed nation on earth. For poor people, for people of color, we throw millions of lives onto that bonfire every year. They just don't normally look like the teenagers in MAGA hats.
This Make America Great Again hat is just as maddening and frustrating and triggering for me to look at as a KKK hood.
Well, they've triggered me. In the wake of the Covington Catholic High School fracas, the red MAGA hat has now become a talisman of evil and a symbol of white supremacy. Savannah Guthrie brought it up with a student at the center of the controversy, Nick Sandman, today on the Today Show.
Do you think if you weren't wearing that hat, this might not have happened, or it might have been different?
That's possible, but I would have to assume what Mr. Phillips was thinking, and I'd rather let him speak for why he came up to us.
So the red hat now is apparently the Annabelle of head coverings, a thing capable of unleashing evil wherever it's seen. There's also a subtext here that's meant to intimidate. We're going to get into that. The left wants to take away your right to wear whatever the heck you want. Now, this is kind of it's weird. It's a left-wing version of Puritanism, their own version of it, where they get to dictate what goody fill-in-the-blank is allowed to wear. And anyone who dares to violate their dictates is either shamed or just labeled hateful, xenophobic, misogynistic, unreasonable, stupid, and, of course, racist. Bishop Talbert Swan, a Harvard Divinity School grad, tweeted, "When Trayvon Martin was murdered, y'all said black parents shouldn't let their boys wear hoodies if they didn't want them perceived as thugs. But y'all don't want your boys perceived as racist little jackasses for wearing MAGA hats? Hashtag Covington Boys." Mr. Swan will join us in a moment. This leftist narrative that a Make America Great Again hat is akin to wearing some Nazi uniform is patently ridiculous, and it's offensive. It's just plain stupid. But this is the defamation and intimidation that the left happily perpetuates. By the way, with little to no pushback. Predictably, of course, Never Trump Republicans are also taking up the chorus. Ross Douth out of the New York Times tweeted in part, "Good rules for life. Don't let your Catholic school students wear MAGA hats for a field trip for the March for Life." And, of course, Bill Kristol never misses an opportunity to hit the president and his supporters, even when he has his facts wrong, said, "The contrast between the calm dignity and quiet strength of Mr. Phillips and the behavior of MAGA brats who have absorbed the spirit of Trumpism, this spectacle is a lesson which all Americans can learn." Whether a piece of clothing says, "Feel the burn," or "I'm with her," it's all a form of political expression, and thus it is speech protected by the First Amendment. You can be offended by it, but you can't purposely use it to intimidate and frighten people and even terrorize them. But today's left, joined by the rabid never-Trumpers, are so desperate to be proven right about the president, they seize on symbols instead of solving problems. I mean, guys, it's a lot easier, isn't it, to brand kids racist for what they're wearing than to debate adults on things like immigration and trade policy. But for some, the MAGA hat, well, it symbolizes something very different.
It was something about when I put this hat on, it made me feel like Superman. You made a Superman. That's my favorite superhero. And you made a Superman cape.
Well, Kanye kind of saw this all coming when he said he didn't want people to control him, to tell him what or how to think because of the color of his skin. Today's real rebels are the kids who dared to show up for the March for Life last Friday. Today's real rebels are the faithful who refuse to genuflect to what's popular and instead defend what they think is right. Today's real rebels, they reject the collectivist mindset of Hollywood, the media, and the universities that obliterate history instead of actually teaching it. And yes, today's rebels will wear MAGA hats, knowing that they might be abused for doing so like the Covington kids were. And in the end, it's really not about the hat, is it? It's about 2020. Trump-hating fanatics aim to deprive the president of any opportunity to brand his re-election campaign. In other words, any Trump paraphernalia will be verboten. I thought about this today, and it's actually, in its own way, a form of voter intimidation and potentially lethal, with consequences that are incredibly destructive. By the way, you can't scream fire, right, in a crowded theater, and you can't scream racist when someone in a crowd wears a hat you don't like. And that's the angle.